In this video, I'm going to try the mobility exercises from pro athlete trainer, physical therapist Jeff Cavalier from AthleanX. You'll see which mobility tests I failed and which ones I passed. I'll also show which exercises and stretches I did on alternate days for 22 days in a row. We will find out on day 22, which is at the end of this video, if my range of motion increased just like Jeff promised. So flexibility is really important. You don't want too much or too little. You want to have full range of motion. So if you're going up, you want to be able to reach things. You don't want to be able to stop right here. So if you're doing sports or just pulling a cup off the cabinet, you want to be able to reach that. So, and if you're doing a deadlift, you're doing a fairly straight leg deadlift, let's say I'm showing you a single leg deadlift, you want to have the flexibility to reach as low as possible to get that nice stretch and strengthen that hamstring. Also, if you're not able to get enough flexibility in the hamstring, it's also inhibiting the front of the leg, the quadricep, because if one part isn't strong, the other part is not going to be as strong as it should be as well. And if you have really large muscles, that will get in the way of flexibility. And if you have too much fat, that will also get in the way of flexibility. But being too flexible is also not a good thing, because that means the joint can be unstable, and that could lead to discomfort and pain. So on day one is the day that you do all the tests. So the first test is the Wall-splat test. And so what I did is I got my ruler and a little pen and I measured it just right so my toes were 6 inches from the wall, and then I put my hands on the wall and I just slid down. Now you're trying to go to 90 degrees, and as you can see, I actually did pass this test. So the purpose of this test is to see how flexible the thoracic spine is, so that is the upper back. And so when actually I did this test, it was very challenging for me and kind of painful, but what hurt the most was my low back when I did this test. There are 6 tests. The second test is the Hinge toe touch test. So what you're doing is you're hinging from the hips and going forward with your knees slightly bent. The point is to have your back completely flat. And again, it's okay to bend the knees, and you're trying to touch your toes. And as you can see, I was nowhere near touching my toes, so I failed this test. So what that means is possibly that my hamstrings are too tight, and that's something I would need to work on with stretches. Test number 3 is the knee touch wall test. So the goal is to keep both feet flat on the ground and to try to touch your knee to the wall. So your toes need to be 6 inches away from the mall. I want to go to the mall. I missed the mall. So 6 inches away from the wall, and I used my ruler and I put my pen down on the ground and just make sure that I was following the rules. And you have to have both feet on the ground and try to get that knee to touch that wall. As you can see, I failed that test. Now, that test is to see if your calves are really tight, which mine are, but what he didn't mention, it actually also tests the ankle mobility. Test number 4, he calls the press up test. It's actually also called Cobra Pose, and he recommends this to stretch out the abdominals since the abs can be very tight. But what he also didn't mention is it actually also tests the flexibility and the low back. The goal is to keep the hips flat on the ground and at the same time press up with hands, but straighten those arms while keeping the hips flat on the ground, and I failed that test as well. Test number 5 is the Thomas test. Now he recommends laying on a box with your head flat, and you bring your knee up, and you just gotta make sure that the leg that's closest to the box is not up in the air, it's parallel. I don't have a box, so I just used my bench right here. And I figured that I would pass that test because my hips are flexible, so I did. So any of the tests that you pass, you actually don't have to do any of the exercises or stretches for those areas, but I decided to do them anyway. Test number 6 is the seated hip crossover test. I think that's what he calls it, basically. Just put this foot over like this, and I know my hips are pretty flexible, so I passed this test. You just want to make sure that the knee is at 90 degrees. So out of the 6 tests, I passed 2 and I failed 4, so I've got some work to do. So the exercise to work the hip flexors is the high box hip lifts. I didn't need to do this exercise, but I wanted to do it anyways. So it's 12 repetitions, and you hold at the top for 4 seconds, 3 sets. To stretch out these abdominals, he recommends Superman's 12 reps, 3 sets. And what's great about this one, it works the low back and the upper back, and also it challenges your shoulder mobility, so it's a great one. The exercise to strengthen the hamstrings and the glutes are the glute bridge with the heel taps. So I did 10 repetitions of each leg, so a total of 20, 3 sets of each, and I really concentrated on the hold and squeezing my butt because I've found you can do it an easy way and a hard way. So the hard way is just keeping that mind-muscle connection and really squeezing it, and try to get your hips as high as you can. To increase the flexibility in the hip internal rotators, he recommends frog pumps. So I didn't really need to do this one, but then when I started doing it, I realized this is really painful. I really felt it in my inner thighs. So I kept that one in. I did 12 repetitions, 3 sets. The last exercise that I did that he recommends are face pulls. Now, I've been doing face pulls for years. I've been doing that in my workouts twice a week anyways. It works the upper back and the back of the shoulders, but I decided to do this anyway and follow his program. So what I did to keep myself on track is I printed out a calendar and I wrote the days that I'm going to do stretches and the days that I'm supposed to do the exercises. Those are the strength days. It's a 22-day program, but I wanted to get started right away, so I actually did 2 extra days. And to make sure that I did all the exercises and I didn't forget any, I wrote them all down. So I did 5 exercises. I did the box high hip lifts, I did Supermans, I did glute bridges with heel taps, frog pumps, and face pulls. So these exercises took 19 minutes because I did 3 sets of each exercise. So the first stretch that I started with on my stretch day was the T-spine stretch. I know I've supposed to have been doing this for a long time because I injured both my shoulders and my upper back, which is the thoracic spine, and this is what this exercise helps with, is to gain that mobility back because my upper back is extremely stiff from all my injuries. Also, it stretches out the lats, this large muscle on the back. So whenever you do pull-ups, and especially when I do a lot of pull-ups, they get super tight and it can be very painful. When you do, your lats are very tight, when you do like a lot of pull-ups, it can be really difficult to raise your arm over your head. So I did 45-second hold and I had my timer. So what I did is I set my timer for, here we go. So I set it for 47 seconds and I started it. That gave me a 2-second start time, and I just held that stretch for 45 seconds until that buzzer went off. And let me tell you, this stretch
was extremely painful for me and I hated it, but I knew it's something that I definitely needed to do. The other exercise that he recommends is the hamstring wall stretch. I've never seen this before, maybe he came up with it, but I did not feel it in my hamstrings at all. I only felt it in my calves and I felt it in my upper back with my arms straight up overhead. I found this one also extremely painful. I suffered through it. I timed it for 45 seconds. I did 3 sets of that. I did the ankle drop test, 45 seconds with straight leg and 45 seconds right after bent leg. Now this stretches both calf muscles. My calves are extremely tight. During quarantine, I started doing ballet. That's a lot of stuff on your toes. So that hurt like heck, suffered through it, and I did those again, 45-second holds, one right after the other, and I did that on alternating days. The press up and hold test that I failed is actually also one of the exercises, or I think he calls it, it's really a stretch, it's kind of both, because I really felt it in my triceps holding that position, because if I had passed it, I would have been straight, but since I didn't pass it, I had my arms bent and it really worked those triceps. So at the end of 45 seconds, I was shaking. It stretches out the abs, but also increases flexibility and the low back, and my back has very little flexibility. So I found this one to be pure torture, but I did it anyway, held it for 45 seconds with my timer, did it 3 times. The back bend on the Physio ball is another stretch that he recommends to stretch out these abdominals, but it also aids in flexibility in your back because you're rounding backwards. So I found this one really fun. It was for 45 seconds. I wanted to keep going. I actually wanted to do this for 2 minutes because I loved it so much. It felt really good. Did that 45 seconds, 3 sets. The lunge and reach is a stretch that stretches out the hip flexors. My hip flexors are actually very flexible, but I thought if I can add a little bit more flexibility, I'll give these a try. So you hold each side for 45 seconds, and I did 3 sets of those every other day. But the thing about those hip flexor stretches, those were so incredibly boring. To make these stretches and exercises more interesting, I would either put my favorite music on and blast it in this room right here, or I would just watch one of my TV shows. The last stretch that I did, he calls the Pretzel Stretch. It's also called the Glute Stretch. Basically, every exercise has 3 different names. So I didn't really need to do this one, but again, I thought, well, if I can get a little bit of flexibility, I'll give this a try. And usually when I do this glute stretch, I don't even hold it for very long anyway, so I held it for 45 seconds, and that was actually a lot harder to hold it because I wasn't used to. I don't think that I gained any more flexibility in my hips from doing it, but I did 45-second holds, each leg, 3 times every other day. And that was the end of my stretches. These stretches took a total of 40 minutes. I couldn't get it to go faster because that's just how long it takes. So on day 22 is test day again. Then you find out how you did, if you gained any more flexibility. So I took the Wall-splat test again, and the first time I tried it, I'd probably say I'd passed it, but because it was so painful, I decided to try it again and see if I could gain any more flexibility. And actually, if you look at the second video, it looks a little worse. Not that I did anything wrong, but it was still painful and I still failed it, even though I did all the exercises exactly like he told us to do. Then I tested my toe touch test. I knew I would fail that one as well, but it looks like I didn't gain any more flexibility in my hamstrings. I really think that stretch that he had for the hamstrings doesn't work. Maybe it works for some people, but it definitely didn't work for me. I'm not saying that's a terrible stretch, because I do think it's really good for stretching the lats because I have my hands up. I will probably keep that in and continue doing that one because I really need to work on stretching my lats, because painful lats that are super tight ends up shooting up through the shoulder, through the neck, and I end up with neck pain and my arm being a little higher up, and it's just really awful. And I really need to work on the upper back stretch so I can gain more mobility. If you don't have proper mobility, you have pain, or more likely to have pain, and more likely to get injured. So I did the knee touch test. I got super close. I was actually really happy and really surprised that I got so close. So I'm gonna keep this exercise in. Now, exercises for, really his program was 10 days of stretching and 10 days of exercises, because the first day and the last day were test days. So actually I started 2 days earlier, so I really did 11 days of stretches and 11 days of exercises. So stretches can take a really long time. So I'm gonna try doing certain stretches and exercises for 3 months. I bet by the time that 3 months goes by, I bet my knee will touch that wall. Thumbs up. So what I'm gonna do is 90 days, or actually 90 days minus the 22 days, I will post in the comments below what tests I passed after 90 days of these. So come back to this post to look in the comments. If you want, put your comment below, just say something to me, and I will reply back to you and let you know what worked and what didn't work. So the last test I did was the press up test. I really can't tell by comparing these two videos if I got any more thoracic upper back extension. My arms might be just a teensy bit straighter. Now, when I injured my shoulder, my neuromuscular therapist, he recommended this press-up test, but he recommended that I do it for 2 minutes with my neck extended. I stopped doing it that way because I started getting extreme pain in my neck. But what's interesting with the 45 seconds, with the way that Jeff showed it, with my neck in a neutral position for 45 seconds, I have no neck pain at all. So I'm gonna continue doing this press-up test, but I'm gonna increase it. I'm gonna just do it every day, but I'm gonna keep the 45 seconds for 3 sets every day. And I am hoping that I will get better extension that will help me in everything I do, whether it's exercise or just moving in general, because sometimes I'm just in so much pain because of my injuries. Even though I went through physical therapy, I still have limited range of motion. So what I had was I injured both of my shoulders, and my doctor told me I will never have full range of motion, but if I can at least get close to full range of motion, it will help me do more overhead presses. It will help me alleviate pain and be able to function like, hopefully, a healthy human being. So, in summary, do these stretches work? Some do, some don't. Now, everyone's different. Just because certain stretches didn't work for me doesn't mean they don't work for you. So I'm going to take some of them and continue doing them, and I'm going to take others and not going to do them at all. Like I said, with a press-up test, I think that one's really good, hopefully, and I'm going to do that every day. I'm also going to do the calf stretches. I think I'll probably do those every day because those seem to be really helping me. I'm going to give it a full 3 months. So because Jeff did not list the exercises, I'm going to go ahead and type these out below so you can just copy them and put them on a Word document and you can print them if you want to try them. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and I'm also going to put the link to Jeff Cavalier's workout that I mentioned below so you can go straight to it. The videos that I post are exercise videos, funny videos, and videos on diet and nutrition. So I put 2 videos up here that I thought you would like, so check those out. I'll see you soon.